Hello there, and welcome to this little critique I've set up. Thank you, Eric Perkins, for um, providing this artwork for me to go over. And hopefully in the future I can do this for a few other artists as well. I think there's a lot that you can get out of it. And yeah, like I would really like to help you guys make a lot stronger pieces. So without too much ado, let's get into this. So Eric Perkins provided um, this piece. He's intended it to be as part of an animatic, so he does have different elements separated on different layers, which is really good. Good layer organization is pretty important to making sure that you have a consistent workflow and you can mess with your elements separately. First thing I want to point out here is let's create a background just so you can see it. Okay, so what he's done as part of his workflow is he's created these separate palettes here, which I really, really love to see. Doing this is a great way to make sure that you're working with a consistent palette, that your colors are going to work well together. A lot of new digital painters don't work like this, and this is really kind of a cue from traditional painting where, you squirt out the tubes on the palette that you're going to be working with, and you only deal with these colors, and because they're all mixed together, they all look like they belong to each other because they're all from the same source. So rather than, picking everything under the sun like this thing here, or let me turn off that gamut warning. So here you can pick, millions of different colors, but if you use all of them in one painting, it's going to look like a loud, like cacophonous mess. And we don't want that. So yeah, so it's really good to see that he's working with his set color palette like this. Really great job. Okay, so let's shrink that for now. Now this is just let's sit back and look at the scene like zoomed out a little bit just so we can get our initial impressions. So obviously a desert scene. This guy's walking in. Can't tell, considering how kind of paler all the colors are, I'm guessing this is like mid-morning where the sun set up. With this style, obviously with the strong sun there, normally there would be huge shadows, but with like more of an animation style like this, maybe you can get away with not having that just for clarity. Um, but it's a good idea to know kind of what your environment is like. So mid-morning in a desert helps us understand what colors we're going to be using. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, this soil, this ground here, this is a pretty dark brown. I'd say you'd expect this kind of brown, like it's kind of wet looking, um, like really moist and heavy, like in the highlands after the rain, not so much a desert. So I would probably go with a lighter, like ochre color. Let's see if it can select this. Just it's not going to look very good, but based on the selection, but just to get a sense. Okay, let's color shift this a little bit. Yeah, this is already starting to feel a little more consistent, I feel like. So, like that. Needs to be warmer. There we go. Actually, let's, you can do an adjustment layer certainly, but just to keep things flowing here, I'm just going to work with more layers. Let's go back to that. Sorry, retracing my steps a little. Bear with me here. All right. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I feel like that kind of sells the environment a lot more than it did before. So we're just going to keep this for now. All right, so another thing I'm noticing just in terms of the overall composition, like this sun smack dab in the center, like it makes it really arresting. Like it's because it's so bright as well, it's coming really far forward. Like it feels like it's super important in terms of the composition where I don't really think it's supposed to be. So what I would probably do is I would take this, gonna just select that. Yeah, so yeah, everything that's on there becomes part of your composition, and you have to decide what the focus of the composition is, and everything has to serve that. So here, I feel like the focus should be just kind of the space of this town, and maybe like the feeling of the character entering it. Like the town is the subject of this. Like the character is a stand-in for the viewer. So what I'm gonna do here, so I'm copying this sun, pasting it. Just gonna shift it off to the side. Change the size of it as well because the size, like the sun would never be this huge, at least in a like our Earth. Then we're just gonna kind of paint over this a little bit to cover it up. Let's go with a soft brush. Opacity. There we go. There we go. So the sun's a little less dominating on this composition now. I feel like I can actually see the town now. Feels very lonely too. Like I'm not quite sure what the story is, but there's nobody else here. I don't know if it's kind of a ghost town. Um, let's see. Let's bring. Yeah, you can even just fade out the sun a little bit. It doesn't have to be pure white. So if we just kind of like, there we go. And that draws even less attention to it. You can still tell it's a sun, but you're not drawing all your eyes toward it either. All right, there we go. Okay. So I'll get to this perspective. I'll definitely spend some time on that. Okay, so that's kind of taking care of a lot of our deep background, which is fine. And just to keep organized here, I'm going to name these new layers as I make them. Sun edit. There we go. All right, so because he's working with line art, I'm going to apply some comic book knowledge here. So when you're inking for comic books, things are very graphic. They can kind of come off a little flat sometimes, but these inkers are good. They have tricks. They have ways of dealing with things. So one of their tricks is thinner lines will fade more to the background because it feels smaller, whereas thicker lines are going to pop forward. So it's going to make you feel like um, like this is like they're bolder, there's more contrast, it's drawing your eye there, like it just kind of helps set the stage there. So let's see, is this an ink layer? Beautiful. All right, I'm just gonna paint directly on top of this. I think this might get a little too time consuming, we'll see. Let me play around with it real quick and um, try not to waste too much time here, like hopefully just enough to get you guys the point. Flow. Let's pop that up a bit. Okay. All right. This can't even tell what race this guy is. That's usually pretty important in like fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, just because it plays into traits and abilities so much. Okay. I just want to really pop this guy up. Yeah. Not trying to do a pro digital inkers guide or attempt here. Like I said, just to give you guys a bit of the impression or that sense of depth. Yeah, and especially if you're animating or doing an animatic here, Eric, this is gonna really help you separate yeah, your subject from your background, and yeah, I think it's a big win in every way. So let's see. Yeah, you can see just adding that heavier black line out around him kind of helps make that pop forward. Okay, and especially here with these really distant elements, they have a really strong line on them that I think is not helpful. Just like the freaking size on that brush. All right, let's make sure that I want kind of a hard brush on this one. So, I mean, you can, for these really distant ones, you can probably even get away with like removing the lines altogether. Um, why don't I try that on the most distant of distant elements? Is that this one? Ah, here we go. Okay. I mean, this is maybe you want to keep things more consistent though and have everything outlined, but um, just try it, see how it looks, and if it serves the story, then might be worth considering. Alrighty, there we go. And I'm just gonna knock this back a bit. Do you know what? Let's go with more of a textured one. I like square brushes. You can feel like you can finesse them a little more. So just like I'm inking, I'm reverse inking here, just like scraping the ink away, making this a little more ethereal, I guess. Nope, took off too much there. Ah, alrighty. I gotta remember like pick up the stylus once in a while, because if you don't, then Photoshop sees it as one single action. So when you undo, it just does the whole damn thing. Which is not what we're going for. Here we are. I'll probably come back in and redraw some of these lines too. Let's see. That's a terrible line. That's what undo is for, isn't it? Okay. All right, so there we go. All right, like this cactus, the line here around this is thick. I think it's even thicker than these buildings, so it's coming way too far forward in the space. So we want to really make sure this isn't going to be competing for attention. And yeah, like if you change the outline and your flats are not adjusting, then you're going to have to redo those, unfortunately. But it's going to make a better piece overall. So, and just like you have thin and thick to imply depth, you can have thin and thick to apply weight too. So a thicker line on the underside is going to give a sense of um, mass to these. Gosh, what do you call them on cacti? Spines, branches, big knobby arms, something like that. All right. All right. Here we go. Alrighty. I think this house, similarly, you might want to knock back a little bit just to make sure it's falling far enough in space. Okay, there we go. All right. One thing that struck me as well, pun very much intended, is this well here. This doesn't feel like the kind of well you find in a desert. I don't think. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's as easy to like tap into the groundwater here. Like, I feel like it would be more coming from like a spring deep within rocks or something. Might be something you want to double check just to make sure it's consistent with a desert kind of a town. Yeah, I don't have too much more to say about that because I could be wrong, but it's just an element that kind of stood out to me as questionable, I guess. There we go. And then, let's see. Okay. I can reopen this when I'm done. Actually, let me save a copy now. It's alright. Save a copy. It's always good. Unlike Procreate, which saves for you, Photoshop, you still gotta manually save, I think. Okay. Other thing I want to mention here is um, something when you're learning perspective for the first time, what they don't tend to tell you is that our eyes don't see like 2 or 3 point perspective or like with the vanishing points. Like we only see, I think, at most one single vanishing point. So if you have two vanishing points, you're covering a lot of freaking territory. Like if you have an ultra wide canvas, maybe you could get away with it. But for most kind of compact, normal canvas ratio sizes, you're not going to see more than one vanishing point. What happens when you put two of them in the same stretch of area is you get kind of a fisheye effect, and that's kind of what's going on here. So I'm wondering if I can get away with just like editing it without redrawing. Let me see if that will work or not. So I can't promise this is gonna come out looking great, but I'm gonna try. So okay, let's keep the main character ink edits. Yeah. All right. So I'm just because it's just a critique and I'll keep this clean. Let's set this on its start grouping some of these layers just to make it easier. City ink. Okay. So just a little show you kind of what his perspective is looking like. All right, so here we have our horizon line. That's pretty clear. And it does look like he put good effort into making sure the perspective was at least consistent, which is probably more important than just about anything else. You can see some of some more amateurish work where they don't seem to give a crap. So we have this. Looks like vanishing points right about at the edge there, and then yep, right at the edge here. So your vanishing points are right at the very borders of your canvas. So suppose this could be accurate if these houses might not be aligned on a grid, so this could be a little off because of that. But this house is definitely in line with this house and in line with that house and probably in line with this house on the left here. Yeah. This is definitely not in the same set of planes, but that just means you can do a different set of vanishing points. You can throw as many vanishing points on a piece as you want. Just each object should remain consistent. Okay, so that's kind of the geometry that we're working with. I think I can get away with this. Let's see. Oh. All right, so I'm gonna do a rectangular marquee selection because the overall geometry of the piece kind of falls in line with this. Might be hard to explain, but let me see if I can edit this correctly. Mm. Edit, transform, and perspective. So what perspective is going to do is instead of changing the size uniformly, when you grab one of these corners, it's going to adjust the others to maintain the perspective based on what you just changed. So what we want to do here is say we're going to pick the far right vanishing point as our one within view. This one is too close. So if we change, let's see, if we change this, what's going to happen is, this is kind of hard to see. All right, so hopefully I can show this in a way that makes sense. I'm going to use a different color here. All right, so we have the lines on this building now. What's happening is I've changed where the vanishing point lies. So now it falls off the edge of the canvas. I think that's it. Yeah. That's one thing I miss about Procreate, the ability to kind of drag a line out. Nope. Is that successful? Let's see. Yeah, maybe I should have had like a demo. That might have gone over better. Sorry, guys. All right, I want to keep that locked. Horizon isn't going to change. All right, so we're still. It's crazy looking. All right, yeah, I'm pretty confident this is the direction it should distort to get less distorted. Okay. Shift that sun over. Maybe it can even go over here. Yeah, I think I like it over here on the right. Yeah, that's a nice place for it to fall in the composition. We just gotta edit this crap out. Oh crap, sorry. That's not what I meant, Eric. There we go. Okay, so back to the perspective real quick. Okay. Yeah, I think this is doing it for me better. But yeah, the intent of it, even if the execution wasn't very good, was to take that vanishing point on the far left and kind of move it so that it exists outside of the outside the canvas, because that's how our eyes more naturally see things. Like our range of view is actually fairly narrow, so just the human eye doesn't quite see that far out. And we need to keep that in mind when we're doing our perspective drawings. And the way that you kind of deal with that is you can use perspective brushes, you can use perspective grids that are designed to like kind of fall off the canvas, but still provide you that like those marks on your canvas where you can follow along and have an accurate perspective drawing. Um, Photoshop also has a built-in, fairly robust perspective engine, but I gotta confess, I haven't really messed with it too much. I've always dealt with that issue more in my drawing before I take it to Photoshop. Um, so that's something maybe we can explore in another video, or we can, I can just go through like a little perspective demo on just how to deal with that. But that was one of the first things I noticed about this actually, were like the vanishing points were like just too close to each other. Um, Sorry to harp on it too much there, um, but it's just part of what I'm noticing, and I think making sure that it kind of comes together in a more naturalistic way is going to make for a much stronger piece. Let's see. Yeah, so yeah, I do feel like it might be good to have at least a few simple shadows. So if it's all right with you, I'm gonna try to knock in some here, just to because the sun's over here. It was good. It was easy that like you hadn't really rendered it, so I can get away with this massive shift in the light source, which okay. So um, let's see. I'm just using a selection tool here to create some easy shapes, and going to it's a good shadow color. Okay. I'll just do the shadows all the same color, and then I can color shift them later on to make sure they look okay. All right. Yeah, redo that. Okay, just kind of swipe in here with that. This color is way off, but don't worry, we'll fix that in a moment. I just want to get these shapes in place. And it's going to run to this building, so you're not going to see it past this point. So, when you're doing shadows too, especially with one major light source, remember that things radiate out in 360 degrees from a light source. So, it's not like your shadows are going to be parallel. They're going to follow on degrees away from what the center is, which is the light. Uh, so back to just knocking in a few more of these shadows here. Yeah, and I know if you're animating this like Eric is, it's going to be it could mean like a pain in the ass if you're trying to add all this extra shading, but I just wanted to add a little bit more um, indication of the light. So I created this very polygonal shape here when this is actually quite round. You know what? With the roof on there, it actually would be very Um, no, there we go. There we go. Hmm. All right, now we're gonna color adjust to make sure these kind of fit. Morning light, things are gonna be a little more cool, pure blue. Let's go with that. Okay. I want to soften up these outer edges. Um, so this is one of the few areas where like a smudge tool is kind of appropriate to use. Just got to be careful with it. So as things get further away from the light source, they're going to get softer, blurrier, more faint. So you just want to make sure your shadows indicating that. It's on a different layer. It's easy to adjust these things. Okay, it's a little more believable. So see how these things like feel way more grounded because they're actually, you know, uh, they're reacting to what the environment is like. So everything kind of in the, like everything you see on the canvas is a clue as to what the environment is like, and all your clues should kind of point to the same conclusion. And as soon as something's a little off, your eye, even if you're untrained, you don't realize it, it's gonna feel out of place to you. So that's we're trying to avoid that. We just want to make sure that we're just adding as many clues as we can. So I love playing with blending modes here. It kind of helps you adapt things so that they kind of fit together a little better. So I've added some shadows here. You can see this is what it looks like. No shadows with shadows, consistent with that. Um, there we go. And like I said, Eric, I understand if you're taking this to animatic, maybe you don't want to deal with shadows at all. But I think this really makes it look nice. Um, let's see. I'm not an animator, but I guess like if it were me, like I would find it forgivable. Just gonna take this because it's such like a strong shape that should obviously be in shadow, so it should be distinctly darker than everything else. I'm just gonna kind of knock this quick into the shadow tones, so it's gonna be less saturated. Slide this darker. There we go. Same with the roof on this well. I think it's one of those things that's just a little too obviously should be affected by the light, so let's make it look like it's affected by the light. So handle that similar, drop the saturation, pull the darkness in. Oh yeah, there, that looks good. Now we're cooking with charcoal. Okay, and this building here on the far right, this also looks like it needs to fall more into the shadow tones, even though there's nothing really to compare it to because you don't see the other sides. So, but you can kind of tell that these colors are, they're not sun side. They're sun side when they should be shadow side. So I'm just gonna give that some retreatment. There we go. And then you just kind of like move around the composition a little bit, just like double checking for different areas that can kind of clue you into um, what's going to serve this composition. Here's what I'm gonna. Okay, So what I'm going to do here is, this is basically a triangle. So I'm just going to select a triangle and then remove the parts that, shouldn't be selected. That's sometimes easier than trying to create the perfect selection the first time. So, all right, hold down the Alt to remove from the selection and just cut out these little scallops. See how easy this is? There we go. And because this is white, we don't need to desaturate it. We just drop the darkness. Oh no. Where's that white color? Huh. Okay, it's obviously something. So what we do is we click on and off our layers to find out what the trouble is. Could be that doesn't have a fill at all. It's just bare canvas. That's probably what's going on. So let's just drop kind of a cooler gray into here. There we go. Go back to naming these layers so we can double check our edits. All right. Par color. Guess this character's name is Par. That's fine. Alrighty. This looks a little... Maybe I did this while I was editing the perspective, but this building on the far left seems a little tilted to the right now, so I'm just going to go in and fix that. Polygonal tool is great when you're working with architecture. Just makes it so much easier. Okay, there we go. I don't quite like how Par is kind of fitting with this building. Like they feel like they're kind of interrupting each other's space within the flow. So let's see, what can I do? Yeah, everything's about problem solving, so it's often what you're going to find with illustration. This is why it's hard. And this is why people should pay you for it. Because you don't learn these skills by accident, you know? Sorry, I sigh a lot because when I'm concentrating really hard, I find I actually kind of hold my breath. So then when I'm done, it kind of has to just like explode out so I can breathe in again. It's weird, but it's just kind of part of how I create. Um, feel like, God, I really wish you could expand the canvas, but well, I guess best you can. All right. So this can be another quick way to deal with perspective that falls way off the canvas. Just create an extra large canvas with larger than your working area, add your perspective, your vanishing points, your horizon line, and then when you're done, just like crop it down in. Um, it's kind of a quick and dirty way of dealing with it. I'm sure Photoshop has better tools, but uh, I never took the time to learn it. So what I'm trying to explore here is if what happens if I extend this building all the way down, like where that falls within the perspective. Let's double check this. Where's my line tool? There you go. Let's go with this hot pink so I can't possibly not see it. All right, so it's matching the ground on the well over there. There's my shape. Okay. So if this building here is on the ground, following the rules of perspective, and if it's in line with this building on the right here, I guess I'm pointing, but my pan doesn't show where I'm pointing. Okay, so then that means that um, let's extend out this character too. Like this is you're seeing part of like how my mind just like completely overthinks things, and maybe this is turning more into a little demo of Neal's craziness rather than like a proper critique of Eric's. But you know, hopefully you guys will get something out of it. So let's go back to just extending the character a bit. So if he's that tall, it's gonna drop to like here. It's like use the part there. Give him like JNCO genes. Okay. Like overall, this figure is pretty decent. Okay. So what we have here is this guy. I think this guy's actually a little too low, or too low, or not seated on the ground properly. Um, yeah, and this is something I struggle with as well in my drawings. Just like sometimes I'll draw a background and I'll draw a figure, and it looks like it's like floating above the ground a bit, just because it doesn't fit within the perspective. So this is why like when you're doing a full like classic illustration, like you look at the Loomis books, they like have the people on the ground plane, and all the people will be in perspective as well, and that makes sure that they're consistent with the geometry that you're working with. So the way we fix that, give me a moment here. Let me try to think about this. I think we might have to shrink him. Is that the answer? Yeah, I think we have to shrink him to make it more accurate. Yeah, he was a little big in comparison in proportion to the other buildings. So if you shrink him, it kind of fixes that for us. Um, let's just double check that this is actually proper um, perspective. So where his legs fall about here. Okay, and his left side of his body would fall about there. So yeah, he'd have to be where he's standing. He has not yet crossed the edge of this building. There's a weird kind of tension that's creating that I'm having trouble kind of wrapping my head around. I don't know if I have the best solution for it right now. Um, I don't want to remove this building on the left entirely, Eric. I think it's good that it's there. It kind of like bounds in the view so your eye doesn't completely fall off the left side of the page there. Let's see. Yeah, this might be something I'd have to wrestle with a bit longer. Um, okay. Let me just like knock um, this in a bit just so we can kind of. I'm gonna paint in the figure here just so we can kind of see, get a sense of the composition with the edits that I've made here, and then we will compare it to the the file I had before I dealt with you. Okay, so just kind of block it in. Doesn't have to be too neat. Just actually fill it in because nothing makes the piece look unfinished more than bare canvas. All right. Yeah, I really love the design of these buildings. I feel like that's really working well. Obviously, put some thought and time into that. So, little details like that really help make the piece feel grounded. So, kudos on that, Eric. And yeah, like it's great that you put this much effort too into the perspective. Um, like it's really obvious when someone just kind of throws together a drawing with like no consideration for perspective. Um, I've definitely been guilty of that before. Like I just want to draw this really cool character, and everyone's gonna love it. And oh, I guess it needs a background, so I'm just gonna like throw a building here, like a little bit of landscape and vanishing point. What's that? We don't need no stinking vanishing point. Alrighty. All right, so as I said before, now we get to just like crop this down. Let's kind of check ourselves, see how we're doing here. Alrighty. Is this the right one? Nope. Sorry. Different piece, guys. There we go. All right. Let's view. There's a way to do like a 2-up, isn't there? Screen mode. Zoom in a bit. Okay, so here you can see like with the edits I've made, sun has been shifted over, knocked down some of these lines in the background to kind of make those elements fall back, pumped up the lines around the main figure, shifted the perspective on the left here, added some shadows, and lightened up the ground to make it, more consistent with like what a desert ground should look like. Yeah, so I think uh, yeah, so you guys get a sense of like how I go about um, considering what my layouts and perspectives are like, the things that I pay attention to. Erica, hopefully this was useful to you. Let's see. Oh, that could be good. Yeah, maybe go back in and change this left building so that's more in space, like the low one on the left. Kind of got caught up in all the spatial edits that I did to focusing on like this area here. So that's something I might go back and fix if I were to keep going with this. But I think this is enough for now. Hopefully it was useful to you guys. If you want to see some more like this, let me know. I'm happy to kind of go through another picture and kind of show you what leaps out to me. And the aim is to make a better piece for you at the end of it, so you can kind of adjust some things that aren't working quite right. So thanks for joining me. Look forward to hanging out with you guys again. Bye.